Welcome back to our final and last plenary of the International Features Conference 2021. We hope you had some fruitful discussions, 3 goes or 3 rounds, and today was the final one as well. We start for this plenary with a question. How often have you been frustrated? Not as a person, but as a journalist. So not because of Corona or some video calls are not properly working, or not because of some technical issues at a remote conference you are attending or something like that. I mean, completely unrealistic examples, by the way. Not that kind of frustration anyway, doesn't count here and now. But that kind of frustration you're stuck with as a journalist. Probably you don't get the answers that you want. Or perhaps you sometimes get this feeling, I have reported about problems, but there's nothing going to change. Perhaps you feel the urge to become more of an activist, to make change, but of course as a journalist there is a line you can't cross. You cannot be both, that's for sure. That's probably one of our basic beliefs. Is it? Tonight our guest will challenge that belief, I guess, giving us first some input, about half an hour, and then we'll open up for Q&A as we have done during the last couple of days. John Peters is one of his many names. He founded the tactical media collective Peng, and he actually does both. He works, for example, with Correctiv, that's an NGO for investigative journalism here in Germany, and he's an activist as well. He was awarded the Aachen Peace Prize and is now our guest. Jean, stage is yours.
Thank you very much. It is strange indeed to speak not to this little computer where you see all people, and it's a great honor that you invited me here. Thank you for that. I start with this background you can see of the Ibiza video. You know, the Ibiza affair, where you could ask yourself who was the journalist here and who did the hard work, who got the evidence, and this Julian H, he's called now, and he's in jail. He didn't make any money of it. He wanted to make money of it, I heard. And the journalist made a lot of money with it, won prizes and so on and so forth. So the motivation was maybe that, you know, he wanted he wasn't an activist, he just wanted to make $1 and was kind of a cowboy person. And still he didn't contextualize. So I know you're professionals, and I don't want to bore you with those journalist basics. But what I need for myself, all right? So what we look at when we do good journalism is exactly what the people from Spiegel and Süddeutsche Zeitung and all the others who wrote about it, Die Zeit and you know, Profil and Presse and all those outlets, they contextualized. So this is what you would always do as a you know, what I'm writing here is, I know you're professionals, and I didn't want to make it too boring, so I made it ironic. I hope you can take it with a little smile. So what you should do is definitely tell who you are, what's your position as an author, what's the context, what's the structure that helps you bring out the story, and why you do this and not another one. Obviously, you don't take any gossip, but you look at what's relevant in society, what needs to get out there, and don't just look at the clicks. And the people who are affected, here I say you silence them. No, of course you don't. You will make sure that they can tell their story themselves. And you do not invade any privacy. And of course, the sources, you do not put, you make sure that their addresses is always kept close. Why am I telling all this? Because now I want to look at activism and journalism and where is the boundaries, right? Because these guidelines here are highly political. it is clearly, of course, sorry, I forgot the most important point. You should always make sure it is a juicy story, and if you start with pigs, people will listen. So, but what I was telling is that this ethical framework of journalism is already a mission, isn't it? It is looking at power structures. If you want to make sure it's relevant, you don't look at, you know, some gossip stuff that is maybe not really interesting. If you're making sure that you're not telling the story about someone who is already crushed and has no position in society, but you look at the structure where you have a big outlet or not, how far can you reach, and so is it really already activism if you do this kind of journalism, or is it basically that you just want the information to get out? You know, that's the main thing here, and we could work with this, right? This could be a working definition, that the activism's prime goals is to change politics, as you just mentioned before, that, you know, you often feel you're doing all this work and then a few well-educated people will read the long reads, the 2 or 3 pages in the newspaper, maybe the cover, you got on the cover, but did it change anything? Well, nah, things are continuing as it goes, and still, as a good journalist, your prime goal is just information, valid information. So you can see also, by the way, in both definitions, ego, no one has an ego here, right? Neither journalists nor activists do this for themselves. It's just for society and for the good of the cause. Speaking of ego, I'm going to tell you the story I did with Correctiv, the Heartland Lobby, we called it. And I'm just going to dive through a few examples here today, and give you a quick glance through so we can talk about the different stories. So the Heartland Lobby, what we did there, here you can see James Taylor. He's the boss of the Heartland Institute. And we want to look at climate denialists. How do they work? How do they spread information? Where do they get their money from? And we went to a German conference of Eike. Oh, here's a small teaser. I'm going to shut up for a minute.
The scientific evidence is pretty compelling that we are not creating a climate crisis.
Es gibt keinen wissenschaftlichen Nachweis für einen menschgemachten Klimawandel.
I feel like we've been in the middle of a James Bond novel for the past couple of days.
Liebe Antifa da draußen, how dare you?
Standing up for free speech and academic freedom in the face of those who would take it away from us.
The Heartland Institute is one of the worst in terms of content.
Okay, so here again, you can look at the snackability, I would call it. How well is the stuff you're presenting snackable, understandable, with emotional music and all these things that, you know, makes it vibrant. Is this already activism? If you use social media and push your story, maybe. We don't know. However, what we did is we went to the Eike conference. You can see it's primarily white old men who are sitting there and talking about how climate change is a myth, and it's proven with physical evidence that all this does not exist. And we went there as a PR agency. So we said we are not political, we just want to understand how you communicate, because these strategies of communication are surely worth $1. And they understood, sure, capitalism is always understandable. And we sneaked in. We, of course, created fake business cards, and we had a fake website done very cheaply with a Greek name. People love Greek names. We called it Phaedros. And so we went to sat in there with all these old white men, and I noticed this guy called James Taylor. And he didn't know who we are. We went there undercover. And I approached him.
I feel like we've been in the middle of a James Bond novel for the past couple of days.
Which I saw too. Anyway, in the evening we talked to him, we had dinner, we kind of befriended, and then he invited us to the conference, in his little conference in Madrid, which was at the side of the UN climate conference last 2 years ago, right? 2019 November. So we went to Madrid. I'm going to just tell you a short background to the Heartland Institute. It's a US lobby organization that is mainly funded by fossil fuels, by financial institutions like the Mercer Family Foundation, and the weapon industry, like the Bradley Foundation is a little bit in there. And then it gets a lot of money from the Donors Trust. And no one knows who is donating to the Donors Trust and how this works, what exactly is the function of the Donors Trust. Basically, it is to shadow off the donors. This is what we kind of thought, but we couldn't prove it. Of course, we're in Germany, so we have to make connection to Germany. We always love to talk about Germany in Germany. So that's why we went to the ICE conference where he was, and there's a connection because the ideas are then being spread to the Bundestag through parties like the Conservative Party, CDU, and the right radical party, AfD. We got a lot of information from Desmark blog. Check it out. I think they even call themselves activist journalists, so they offer in-depth research on climate denialists and lobbies in the climate sector. And so we went there. We went to Madrid, where he promised us there would be no journalists involved. It's a very small little exclusive conference. And, conference. You can see it is a very small room with just a bunch of people, but they made it look like a conference, a big thing, right? In the evening, then, after 8 hours of boring talks about how climate doesn't exist and climate change and whatever, they just repeat themselves and stream it. We went to the dining table, and you can see in the background, there he is, James Taylor. And in the background, there's a little couch, and I went to him and I said, "Hey, James, I've got good news. Can you have a minute?" And we literally went to the hotel lobby, and did lobbyism. So I did it like in a cheap movie, and I said, "I've got $500,000 from a client I'm not gonna disclose, but it's obviously from the automotive industry, and we need your advice, and can you help us?" And when I dropped this sum of €500,000, he was just like telling me all the stories he's got, how to frame, how to create fake news, how he's gonna, buy some scientists or offer some scientists who are gonna say exactly what I want, how he should make sure the articles are in the look of New York Times, and so the lefty people will consume it, and all the mechanics of disinformation. He was spreading them out for me, which was, in this blunt directness, was already impressive. But then when we went home, we thought, okay, we maybe want to have it on paper, right? We don't just want to have it in my memory protocol, as he told me. So I asked him, maybe you can give me an offer, right? And I called him, and after 2 hours, he gave me this whole perfect paper, where here it's in English. You can see he is offering me a series of lively, compelling YouTube videos and in-depth policy papers, and so on and so forth. And there was a sentence, "If adequately funded, we can also have some scientists who will back it up." So there we were, and on top of it, he told us that we could pay this through the Donors Trust, because I told him that my client wants to be anonymous and how we can do that. And he said, no problem. Donors Trust is there for you. So you donate to Donors Trust, they take 10-20% off, and they forward it to us. So here we had it, black on white. This was a very simple, clear undercover mission, and it was a journalist story. So just to round up quick rules, is not ironic now what is important when you do undercover work. Of course, you know it, I'm sure. There's no other way to get the information. We could not call him and just ask him if he can tell us all this to the journalist network. He would never have done it, even though afterwards he told me that he openly said they could just have asked me. And it has a high relevance. And I think the third point is very important again, and that's the especially political thing, that you should never box down. You should never, you should always look at who is the person you want to go undercover to. Is it someone in a position of power? The other story I wanted to tell you is about, which is framed as an art or art activist story. And beware, because in this story we made sure we would always care for the exact journalist ethical framework. So what we did, it was the time of the pandemic when it just started, and everyone didn't know, what's going to happen. Some like big changes are going to come. Now also people will notice how important the state is and how we can tackle climate change by big economical changes and so on and so forth. And the question was, how can we get companies to, take a position here? And what would they say about that? Are they even open for radical change? Which in climate change, we obviously need radical change outside the normal framework. And we couldn't just call them up and ask, the big German companies if they want to get out of coal mining or if they want to stop producing meat and so on.
Ich frage meine Kolleginnen von Peng, ob sie vielleicht investigative Methoden haben, um an die öffentlich doch relevanten Informationen ranzukommen. Und siehe da, Peng hat eine Idee, wie man an die Informationen kommen könnte. De Vries, die Programmiererin, hat für mich eine Website gebaut, in der Peng sich als Bundesamt ausgibt.
Und es ist wirklich so einfach, mit denen in Kontakt zu treten?
So, sagt de Vries, könnten wir vielleicht besseren Zugang zu den Unternehmen bekommen.
Ja. Oh, jetzt bin ich richtig aufgeregt. Und tatsächlich, wir bekamen direkt am nächsten Tag den ersten Telefontermin. Das war so einfach, dabei war die Website noch nicht mal.
So you see, this was just an excerpt of the film we did. We just created a website of the ministry, a fake website, and we got in touch with the CEOs. And it was very, very quick. We could talk to them. Sometimes it was the CEO, sometimes it was a middle range. And what came out of these talks was impressive because first of all, it was for us the first time we could see how companies do speak when they speak directly to the state. So all the companies were hoping for subsidies. We knew that we've got problems in economy, so everyone was like, in a free market, you always look at subsidies. And they were very open for change, especially the middle positions, not the big CEOs, but the middle positions. They were very pragmatic. One told us from one of the biggest meat producers in Germany, Westfleisch, he told us, yes, of course we can stop producing meat. We can go to veggie meat. We just need political advice or rules. As soon as the politics tells us to stop that, we will. We're open. So give us a guideline and we will follow politics. The CEOs on top, they were more these bulldoggy people who were trying to get us down and say, no, we will never change anything. We know what to do and you have to follow us. So there's clearly a divide, right? But still, even some of them were saying that they could become more good for society, and they could create charity organizations that do not go for profit, for example, in the real estate sector. There was Vonovia. But okay, I'm just going to give you another excerpt from this little film where we talked with the boss of RWE, the fossil or the energy company, which relies a lot on fossil fuels and now is getting off it, but only for a lot of money.
Wenn man an die Verantwortung für die Zukunft unserer Gesellschaft denkt, kommt man an folgendem Bereich nicht vorbei: dem Energiesektor. Der größte Player unter ihnen ist RWE und die setzen gerade voll auf erneuerbare Energien. Laut Medienberichten könnten sie über 2 Milliarden Euro für den Kohleausstieg bekommen. Das Prinzip der freien Marktwirtschaft läuft in etwa so: Die Unternehmen setzen so lange auf Technologien, die nicht zukunftsfähig und umweltschädlich sind, bis sie Gelder vom Staat verlangen können, diese umzubauen. Rolf Schmitz, der Vorstandsvorsitzende von RWE, hat natürlich auch mit uns, dem Bundesamt für Krisenschutz und Wirtschaftshilfe, telefoniert und wollte bei dieser Gelegenheit auch noch Geld für seinen neuen Hype, den Wasserstoffmarkt.
Also wenn man schon sehr viele Mittel in die Hand nimmt, dann würde ich im Sinne der Modernisierung und im Sinne der Energiewende, also CO2-Vermeidung und Ähnliches kommendes Thema Wasserstoffwirtschaft natürlich stark in den Vordergrund rücken, weil es keine andere Möglichkeit zur Dekarbonisierung der Wirtschaft gibt.
RWE war echt der Endgegner. Einfach ein Riese, der die Politik weitestgehend in der Hand hat. Das Gespräch war eine echte Herausforderung, da Herr Schmitz unsere Kollegin mindestens 10-mal unterbrach. Aber eine Sache wurde ganz klar: Es gibt 3 Dinge, die ihm wahnsinnig wichtig sind: Wachstum, Wachstum, Wachstum.
Aber dass wir trotzdem jetzt umlenken sollten. Und daher ist die Frage, so bei den Schlüsselunternehmen hier in Deutschland, ob Sie dabei wären?
Nein, das wird auf keinen Fall funktionieren. Also das halte ich für ziemlichen Unsinn, was Sie da suggerieren, weil wir werden nur mit Technologien und mit Wachstum auch, also daraus heraus in die Zukunft weiterkommen können. Also wer glaubt, dass wir uns alle gegenseitig die Haare schneiden und ähnliches und dass es damit dann funktioniert, nee, das wird überhaupt nicht funktionieren.
Genau, trotzdem bleibt die Frage, ob jetzt nicht eine historische Chance ist, die ganze deutsche Wirtschaft neu zu gestalten, zu sagen, dass der Kapitalismus, wie wir ihn kennen, wird so nicht weitergehen können, wird durch etwas Neues ausgelöst werden, dessen Gestalt wir noch nicht kennen, aber den wir jetzt zusammen formen können und wo wir gerne also große Unternehmen, die Schlüsselunternehmen Deutschlands gerne mit dabei hätten.
Das wäre ein absolut historischer Fehler und ich würde mich vehement mit allem, was ich kann, dagegen aussprechen.
All right, so what we did there is obviously ask the systemic questions of change, and we had a very clear political position. On the other hand, we just want to know, how do companies react on that? Do they have a plan B? Do they plan for the climate crisis in a way that, when they cannot grow anymore, what's happening then? And we were very keen to do proper work. We sent them the protocols of what we discussed with them 72 hours before we released everything. So we had 11 legal firms who were all for 72 hours preparing to crush us. You might know this when before you release something, but no one could. Everything was very well done. So this was for me something I never did in this scale, and it worked fine. It was received very well by international media as well. And so then still the question was, who is the sender? Because we did that and everyone said, yeah, but these are activists, these are artists, this is not journalism, even though they used journalist means. So I think there is a divide. But what if the sender does the same thing and is a neo-Nazi, for example? Is a neo-Nazi able to do journalistic work to uncover the truth? And there's one example I want to show you, who his name is Kilic, and he might not be a neo-Nazi in the classical sense, but he is definitely right-leaning or radical-leaning. And he calls up German politicians, and says that he is someone else. So in this case, we will see now, he said he is the boss of the Social Democrat Party, and called one of the colleagues and asked him if he wants to become the new finance minister.
Hallo Ralf, hier ist Norbert Walter-Borians. Hast du kurz Zeit?
Ja, klar.
Wunderbar. Ich habe ein Anliegen, über das ich kurz mit dir sprechen möchte. Du hast sicherlich mitbekommen, dass es in der Parteibasis nach der gestrigen Sitzung stark rumort.
Ja.
Und Saskia und ich haben nach vielen Gesprächen mit Genossinnen und Genossen uns nochmal zusammengesetzt und möchten eine strategische Änderung durchsetzen, mit der wirklich beide Camps zufrieden sind.
Ja.
Uns ist erstmal wichtig, dass wir am Freitag bei dem Parteitag ein klares Signal setzen, dass wir einen Neuanfang wollen, ohne aber unverantwortlich zu werden. Und ich glaube wirklich, das geht nur über einen gemeinsamen Weg. Und in Rücksprache mit Kevin Kühnert und Karl Lauterbach, die mir ganz klar zu verstehen gegeben haben, dass wir ein deutliches Signal setzen müssen, glaube ich, dass wir die GroKo erhalten müssen, aber gleichzeitig den Vizekanzlerposten mit einer bekannten progressiven Stimme neu besetzen möchten. Und mit Saskia im Gespräch haben wir da an dich gedacht. Was hältst du davon?
Das ist jetzt natürlich sehr überraschend. Da müsste ich im Moment drüber nachdenken, aber Erfahrung als Finanzminister habe ich tatsächlich.
Ja.
Und vorstellen kann ich mir das.
All right, so here we could see, no, that's too far, sorry. Here we could see that there was a politician who was very eager to get this new position, even though it wasn't real. So it was, for his colleagues, and was not good looks in the Social Democratic Party, and he kind of lost some power with it, and everyone could mock him a little bit. But still, I think it is the technique that he used was brilliant, even though the motivation was not one I would share. Another radical example of mixture of activism and journalism, I think, is Navalny. As you know, he went through he still goes through horrible torture, but the movie he brought out with 106 million views is, I don't know, it's a mixture of like Greenpeace, interventionism, quite good research. I mean, he kind of used the research of journalists. He is not, many journalists say, be very careful with him, I don't want to cooperate with you. Bellingcat did, Correctiv did. And he wants to become the new president, very clearly. He is doing this not for just spreading information. He uses information to make political changes. So I think it's kind of helpful to have these two goals to separate those. And still, if you look at the term of high relevance of undercover work, of investigative journalism, high relevance is a very political term, a clearly political term. So to give you another example, if you find out that a politician has a sexual fetish and takes hard drugs, some green liberals will say, well, whatever. Many people do that, and that's a private issue. And the conservative people will say, well, this is our traditional values are deteriorating here, and this is an important fact. And maybe in the case of Austria, this is the only way we can get rid of Sebastian Kurz. So many journalists are now looking for evidence, a video where Kurz is taking cocaine. And do they do it because they want to win the next journalist prize, because then he's gone off power, or do they do it because of information and truth, or do they do it because he is quite a right radical person who is taking off democracy? We don't know, but still, here you've got a mixture of the different motivations. I think to end up this little presentation, I would ask who is not just the sender, but who is framing the product, the piece, as activism or as journalism? Because this tells a lot about the person who says, nah, this is not journalism, this is just some crappy activist. In Russia, it might be someone completely different than in Germany or another capitalist system. So, and it can also be not just a structural political point of view, but it can also be a kind of, narcissistical thing to say, I'm a real journalist and this is not a real journalist. Or I'm an artist. And what, because in these ideas of art and activism and journalism, it always gives the person certain access to society. So if you're an artist, you can access completely different realms than if you are a journalist or an activist. So it also has a function, I think, in terms of accessibility and exclusion. That's it for now. We can open the discussion, and you can find me on Twitter and online. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Just come over.
Yes.
And bring your intensive rest of water with you. Yeah. You need your ear, otherwise you won't hear the questions.
Okay.
You need it to get the questions. So this is the opening of the Q&A session. So if you have some questions for Jean, just give us a digital raise of your hand, or raise of your digital hand, this way probably, and then we'll put you on screen, or at least try, so you can ask your questions directly. Perhaps just stay there at the last point for another second. You were saying along the line, it depends, the framing depends on the sender. Mm-hmm. In your perspective, the same piece, would it make a difference whether, for example, as a sender it's a WDR, we call it the WDR documentary, mm-hmm. or you would do exactly the same piece as the Peng Collective, so somebody use it or watch the thing with, oh, this is a journalistic piece and yours would be an activist piece, and I know. Do you think there would be a different perception, or have you experience in these kind of
Definitely,
things?
100%. Only the question, I don't know if they would do it the same way. I mean, we also disguise with like funny hats and stuff, so this is something I'd never see in WDR. I'd love to.
You never watch TV in February, for example? There's a lot of carnival coverage going on, so there are a lot of
okay. Oh yes, that's true. And they also get a lot of information out of people there. Yeah. But
true.
But yeah, no, I think it's the sender always is important, and not just in a positive sense. Which is another case for satirical content. I mean, now we have with John Oliver and all the Americans under Trump who understood that news and satirical work needs to become serious now. And we cannot continue to just make jokes. And all of a sudden you had these satirical people who became extremely investigative and political and told stories with a smile and with other techniques than the proper, we have proofs for everything because we can make questions, we can sing things, and we know things we cannot prove, so we're just going to sing a song about it. These are all new techniques that are evolving right now. Very, very interesting. But
isn't that also like it's on the line of becoming dangerous because you can imply a lot, but always say, well, look, we didn't mean it like that, or there's room for interpretation, so we hide behind that we can't say, well, we have the facts and here they are?
Exactly. Absolutely. And I think one of the other dangers is that what comes in here is trust. Because we will trust the one sender, John Oliver. We think he's a great person, so I will trust what he says. And if he sings this, it might be true. And the others will say, no, I just trust my, Trump people, whoever, right? And this comes in, and it's another story, but this comes in because of the loss of forensics in our society. We have more and more information, and it's more and more difficult to do proper forensics to prove things, because with deepfakes, with all the possibilities of proof, is in the end, I trust your channel, I trust the WDR.
Brand, and it's a brand in the end. It's like a trusted brand.
Yeah, and I hope that you will do your work properly. And the more often you prove it and you show that you have a good experience in journalistic work, the better it is. And
do you think there's a lack of tools in journalism? Because I was thinking about like how, for example, do I identify a deep fake? And then I was thinking about a lot of newsrooms, and probably there are newsrooms definitely who can identify deep fakes, but I personally know a lot of newsrooms who can't, me included. So it's becoming dangerous. Is there a lack of tools? Are we, I don't know, behind?
It comes down to trust again. I think there is not a lack of tools. It's just the sheer quantity and expertise you need, also in data mining and in the whole cryptology, and to understand how social networks work and who says what. And I don't know many newsrooms who dig into Telegram chats, for example. And it's a big source with a lot of anonymous and non-anonymous people. So we have the tools. It's just it's changing so fast that we're
not keeping up.
Yeah, and maybe we also stay in the journalist. I mean, when you do that, more and more people go to the Chaos Computer Club in Germany and ask them, hey, can you help us to prove this? Because they can't themselves. So maybe they should think about having some programmers in the newsroom. Or they should think about having some biologists and chemists in the newsroom to explain climate change and the truth behind things. I think the boxes of the journalism, the scientists, the expertise we have are changing fast and are not the same as they were in the 50s.
Talking about climate change, was there any feedback of the Heartland Institute to your story, like calling you and saying, well, we want that money you promised, but we didn't approve your story?
The funny thing is, he didn't say, denied that he said what he said. So, I mean, all we had was proof of my recollection, right? After he told me all that, you're not allowed in Europe to record the voice. So I had to write all this down, and we published it. And he could have never said that. But what he said is, I did say all this, but I also said that I do it because, not of the money, but because of my ideology. So then he kind of confirmed it, which was very sweet for us because we had the confirmation.
Were there any legal consequences in any case yet?
No.
So you make sure you have your lawyers, as you say, what was it, 11 law firms on the side, so you make sure nothing.
And funnily enough, my lawyer was called, no, actually it was 10 law firms, because one company called my lawyer because they wanted her, and she said, sorry, I can't help you, I'm already on the other side. Okay. So we have got a really good media lawyer. No, but of course, I had legal consequences for other things I did in my activist world. So in the journalist world, I had no legal consequence.
What is it, can you tell us how far you would go as an activist? I mean, as you say, there can be some reasons for crossing a line. Like, I can record you with a hidden device because I can't get the information any other way, which is, if I remember correctly, for example, exactly the line the highest court in Germany would draw as well. If you can't get it any other way, you are allowed to, roughly. But is there a line for you, like, I don't know, this is a small kind of crossing? So where's your line? How far do you go?
Well, where's the line? I think there's not the one line. It's a complex, many lines where you.
I was talking myself.
And on another page, I wrote the critical campaigning manifesto, where I have 11 points, where I exactly explain what is my ethical framework, what I should do and what I should. Very simple things, nothing surprising. Like, for example, always make sure people involved are speaking themselves. Always make sure you don't box down. Don't do it to the survival of your organization, but for the thing itself. But this is ethical work. This is like, you can say activist work in the media world. I know of Gavin McFadden, rest in peace, the former boss of the investigative journalism network in London. I think it was him. He can't say anything because he's dead, unfortunately. But I think I remember about him the story that he stole a passport, and he was in another country, and he had to get the information out. And in his hotel, there was a pile of passports, and he took one out and went over the border and sent it back with a parcel to the hotel. But this is clearly illegal because you shouldn't do that. And then the news hit, the story hits the news. And you have to weigh the options. And sometimes there's only bad and worse. And then I think it's it's a question of legitimacy, how far you go.
Was there any time a situation where you did something and regretted afterwards? Because like with his passport, probably for himself, he could argue good reasons for that, saying, well, it's for the greater good, blah, 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 blah. And perhaps in hindsight, you think, well, it wasn't that good of an idea.
I don't say it was good. I'm just giving
just for you.
And for me, and if I couldn't remind on this stage right now, because so far everything went quite well. Sometimes, there is one story which I can't disclose here, but where we had an informant who then was uncovered, unfortunately, by the people he was working against, and that was hard. That was hard because we did a wrong move.
So because of the wrong move, he was discovered. And then, can you give us a broad idea what happened to him?
No, I can't tell you.
Okay. Was there anything? I don't know. Are we still on? Just give us a signal if we are still on YouTube. That sometimes happens.
Wir sind rausgeflogen. Ja.
Ihr gebt uns ein Signal, ne? Dann frage ich jetzt nicht weiter, weil sonst würde sich das... Ich habe 1000 Fragen, aber...
ja. Lange nicht mehr auf der Bühne gewesen. Das ist echt...
Ist irre, ne? Es fühlt sich dann doch nochmal... Yeah, Florence, somebody just write in the chat, what a cliffhanger. So yes. I don't know where we lost you.
But it was an amazing story, wasn't it? Especially this informant.
Amazing. I mean, what you told us about it was amazing, wasn't it? So move on from that story to another one. No, sorry. I was asking, so it was a wrong move on your side. That's why your informant was discovered. You were responsible for that on your side.
Yes. And I really cannot tell more about this online. But this was definitely, and people, I mean, this is something with informants, which I think in journalistic work, it is very hard because you are working in a high level trust to this person. And all of a sudden, once the story is out, many outlets say it's not my job to make sure this person is fine. And
would you say it's your responsibility? Is that a responsibility?
I think in many situations, Yeah, are we still online? Is it working? Hello, is everyone there? Yes.
Okay, so we just.
So I think it is difficult, and it depends really on the person who is the source. If it's a high professional spy, he knows the story, he knows how it works.
And probably knows his responsibility. It's like something he can assess the risks a bit more than others.
If it's someone who is like a lone mother with a child and she's just coming from refugee camp and says, okay, and now what? You have your Pulitzer Prize and I'm getting, back to my country in war. This is something else where I think, again, look at the power structures and look at how you can, what maybe is your responsibility.
I was wondering about one point. which is connected to other stories you did, where you discovered, for example, how right-wing parties, which mechanism they use to make sure they get media coverage. And you mentioned something similar in your input you gave a couple of minutes ago, saying, well, look, we discover all this infrastructure. The guy from the Heartland Institute told us how we do this. And I'm often wondering about that myself. That me included, as media, we know these kind of structures, but we report anyway. Are we a bit too naive? Don't we have other guidelines? Do we do the wrong things? You know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah, it's a very hard question. There is one case where I got the email of a right radical Beatrix von Storch,
a right-wing politician in
Germany, and she was explaining her media strategy in this email. She was saying exactly how she wants to do it, and that now they should shift from criticism of Europe to criticism of Islam, and they should, and this is, the press will love it, she says. They will write about it up and down. So what we did is we released this email, and it wasn't the Spiegel, and we passed it. Back then I wasn't working in journalist realms yet, so we were kind of the hackers, even though we didn't hack anything. But this is how they tried to not say, okay, we have it, but we have this hacker information to stay clean. Fair enough. And we thought, okay, now the press will not do what Beatrix von Storch wants to, and still it didn't work. Everyone did exactly how she said, even though it was public how she wants people. I think that's if you ask me, it's not the whole story, but I think
asking you.
Yes, it's the tragedy of liberal capitalism and media embedded in this, because.
Care to elaborate on that one?
Yes. So what happens is that what media wants is to report in a neutral way and say what happened. So the right populists are saying, I'm gonna, we are planning to kill children at the border because that's what we have to do. And then media will be, gosh, that's racist, but she said it, so I'm writing it down, and people will click it. And so the clicks are getting higher, advertisements are running well, and everyone is hyper frustrated. And they say, well, we just have to be neutral.
We just reported the news.
Just report it, right? And still, this is the trickery of, and also this is what happened with Trump and fake news. I mean, we all know it. It's a Romanian advertisement people where in Georgia, I think there were many who were creating fake news because they clicked so well. And this was an extreme part of it. But you can take the reality, which is horrible, and not snackable, and which is snackable. And this snackability
why it works. There's a question.
Is a danger.
From Jacob, and just give me a hint. Do we put him on screen, or I'm just reading the question? Okay, I'm just reading the question. He's asking, Peng many times delightfully exploits a blatant lack of research by journalists, double-checking sources, etc. This might have to do with the neoliberal restructuring of the media sector, which killed off most research jobs, except in the big mainstream media companies. So on one hand, you demand a strong journalist ethic, but on the other hand, you are exploiting these weaknesses. Do you see a contradiction here?
I do, and sometimes it's also that's also referring to your question. Sometimes did you do some things where you thought, "Gosh, that was horrible." Yes, I remember when we did a fake video as Peng of the CDU, the ruling party in Germany, Conservative Party, where it was a fake, and we demanded to stop exporting small weaponry, and Associated Press reported about it. So Associated Press called us and said, "Are you from the CDU?" And we said, "Yes, we are," and that was it. So this was a double checking. They could just have asked someone else from the CDU, or do they exist? But there we lied to the press, and this was a hard moment. We thought oh gosh, but the idea was, well,
did you call them back saying, well, look, we lied?
Actually, the Spiegel called us as well, did the same thing, and because we had an embedded journalist of the Spiegel sitting next to us, we were in the other room, we were saying, hey, look, we just have your colleague here. We don't want to lie on one line and tell the story to the other. So it's a fake. And
which is difficult, isn't it? Because you lie to one journalist and you don't lie to another journalist because you're in cahoots with him.
Yeah, well, basically we did our artwork, and I felt it is the journalist's job to do their work properly. Now you can say, as Jacob says, neoliberalism does squeeze journalists into. The guy from Associated Press called me afterwards, super angry, obviously. And he said, today I did 15 articles in one day for Associated Press. 15. So how can he double check everything? And this was a good news. He felt, oh, finally, good news. Let's go. That's a quick one. And there is no good way out, I think. It is, they're going to stumble from time to time, and then they have to correct themselves well. And some journalists will say, okay, that was a mistake.
But on a personal level, let's say he's an intern, or he has a 1-year contract.
Yeah,
I looked it up. Could be the end of his career.
He still works there. I looked it up.
But just as hypothetical.
Absolutely. And I felt very bad about it. But what can I do? Can I say, sorry, I'm so sorry? No, he's going to say, fuck off. So there is no right and wrong.
No strict line for you.
Yeah.
There's another question from Phil from the UK, and I think we can try to get him on screen. Just hang on for a second. And Phil, if you already can hear us, obviously, just open your mic so we can see. Oh, that looks really dangerous against the. There you go. There you go, Phil. So,
hi there.
Yeah, please ask your question.
Thank you for the discussion. I just wanted to share, a thought that I had that was, or an idea that, like, when you make a piece of art or make a feature or do a piece of journalism, like, you are informed by, or you're searching for, or you're serving an idea of the world, a story of the world, a vision of the world. And so I don't really think the journalism activism divide is actually kind of true or possible. I think you're always an activist. That's my feeling. And I just wondered what you thought about this idea of journalistic objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good point from Phil.
Yes, thank you, Phil. And that's coming from Britain, I believe, where there's usually it's a very hard divide.
There will be other questions from Britain on the line now. I don't know.
Yeah. So thank you for this question. And obviously, you can imagine that I think it's blurry. And it is, as I said, you should always look at who is doing this divide and why the person is doing this divide. And I totally agree. There's no such thing as objective journalism, but there's a process. There's a process to objectivity. So on this process, you can look at the different instruments you use to double check. And this is the list I did in the beginning of the talk. And I think there's one point where I said makes the position of the author transparent. Mm-hmm. So you cannot always at Evening News say, hello, welcome to Evening News. My name is so-and-so. I'm a female, white, academic parents and, living in capitalism, and I just lost my job. That's why I'm standing here, and I have to do another one that I hate. And now I'm telling you the news. So you can't do that. But you can maybe do it online now, so you can give a section about how this media outlet is embedded into the economy, which I think would be great. But
like a disclaimer, like a self-positioning.
Yes. We have those and those people paying for advertisement. We have, and Springer Verlag does it a little bit, which I think is great. They have their 5 rules in Germany where they say where their ethical framework is.
Which is actually the big publisher of the Bild Zeitung, the biggest tabloid we have in Germany.
And they say that they are never ever going to be racist and sexist, which is great. So again, you can question if they stick to it. They even say they're not going to be anti-Semitic, and they sometimes are. But it is. I think this transparency of the authors and of the speaker is highly important and is not done enough. So this would be my main answer to the question.
So what about you? Like, what is your kind of framework? Why are you doing this? What is your self-positioning in this?
Well, I do position myself again and again through my artwork and through my technical media work. And I clearly go in there and work for different people who say, look, we believe that you can do proper journalistic work. And they're not going to get the same thing as they get from, I don't know, someone who's trained 15 years in investigative reporting and does everything but carve himself or herself out of the picture, which I think is fine. It's not something, it's something I cannot. I am clearly having a position that you can see in all my works, which is clearly left-leaning, which is clearly, I'm not...
and as we both are white, middle-aged, privileged.
Exactly, and I have access. That's another thing. This privilege to do that is only one because some people cannot do it, they would lose their jobs. If they would say, look, this is my political position and I'm a journalist, most outlets would say, well, not here, right?
There's a question actually from Anna. She's working for Deutschlandfunk, so the national German radio, and I think we put her on screen. There she is.
Hi. Hi. You were talking about your own activist world and your journalist world. And I wonder, how can you trust yourself that you always know where to draw the line? So how do you know it about yourself? In which time you're in your activist world and in which time you're in your journalist world?
Yeah. So first of all, I never trust myself. That's a good question.
Which is a cute answer, actually.
Yeah.
It's like, it sounds good, but what do you mean by that?
Yes. So I can tell you my strategy. One is that, and that's still on the meta abstract thing. I think if we always walk in circles and we don't just go straight, we will never come out of the woods. So I think even though I never know if I'm right or not, I'm trying a direction. And very simply put, it depends on the people I work with. So if I work with WDR, I will make sure that I have other colleagues who double check what I do. By the way, which I think in gonzo journalism is way more interesting if you have someone at the Gezi protest saying, I am right now in the middle of the barricades and here's people singing and there's the police attacking us. And he's in the middle of the thing, and then there's teams from, for example, Deutschlandfunk or something, who will then contextualize it. So this one person doesn't need to contextualize everything, but gives you the subjective perspective, and they might then say from the studio, well, Erdogan said this, and this is the other side, which is completely different than just saying, okay, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and it gives you another vibe. So I prefer this. On the activist side, if I work with people from Greenpeace, from the Peng Collective, who no one of them is saying I'm doing journalism, well, I believe it's fair to say, me neither. I'm not going to be the one journalist in this pot. So this is, still, it is, sometimes I'm smirking and saying maybe this Klingelstreich am Kapitalismus was journalism, hey, even though if we had funny hairs and did a little bit of fun, but this is mainly to challenge the discourse.
Talking about disclosure and talking about transparency, I was wondering about when you say we go to this conference at Madrid with the Heartland Institute.
Yes.
Where do you get your money from? How are you financed?
Oh, this was paid by Correctiv. They gave us the money. Correctiv paid for it.
Yeah, investigative.
And I think I was out of this. I sold this, I didn't do it on my own. I did it with them in a team and with my wonderful colleague Katharina Huth, who is a climate reporter and investigative journalist there. And so but what I think is that they sold it to ZDF and partly, or they kind of, it was a collaboration. So it was partly funded by ZDF. And
circling back to the question I asked before, is this, I don't know, the bigger idea for you, your personal motivation is like, I don't know, it sounds very big now when I put it, it's like making this world a better place. Is it like this? Because you do this with a smile, and it is really, I can relate to that, but is it like you really want to change something? Is that at the core for you?
Well, yes. And I think this utopia of, there's so many things when I grew up, and if you ask such a big question, I have to answer in a cheesy way, maybe, and I don't mean it cheesy, because this impossibility to explain the world, to not understand why is all these things happening, and it becomes more and more, like all the climate change, the right radical decisions, the people who are starving, and all this happens at once, and we know it, and this access to all this information is so much that you wonder, could there be an alternative, and to try to shape this alternative in little pathways. And I think right now we're in a historical moment since 2007 latest, when the big financial crisis broke and everyone was like, okay, we need a big change. And now climate crisis, big change. But what is it? So what I think we are missing in Germany is a journalism that does constantly also openly, transparently asks a systemic question. And systemic question and says, how would be a more solidarical, non-capitalist world look like? Just for information. I'm meaning it, right? Let's think it. Let's think it through. Humanitarian, solidaric, ecological world. And instead, I think there is a lot, I don't think there's much investigative journalism questioning CEOs. This is not the daily business of journalism.
You said, for example, you're working with the Correctiv, which is like NGO in Germany for investigative research. Just to get an idea of your network, this is one partner. Who are other partners, networks you're working with? How big is your team? Just to get an idea of your working structure.
Well, I'm just one of, I think, like many freelance people. So on the journalist side, I also work with Jan Böhmermann with the ZDF Magazin Royale, before NEO Magazin Royale.
So he's very famous in Germany for his shows.
It's kind of a John Oliver. He might kill me for saying that, but it's like a satirical.
John Peters. Jan Böhmermann is John Oliver.
No, he is, of course, he's uncomparable worldwide. And
Böhmermann, you mean?
Yes. No, I really like his work, and so I was happy to be able to research a few things there. And of course, they have a huge team of really good people researching things, and so I was just part of the whole team. And then with Correctiv I'm working, and then I work on the other side. I work with NGOs and for Peng. And right now I'm doing theater work with the Ruhrtriennale or the Ludwig Forum.
Which is like a festival here in the
exactly.
Royal,
Ludwig Forum is a museum, an international arts museum. Or biennials, or so I'm switching between arts, activism, and journalism.
Do you do any precautions for yourself?
Yes, that is basics. So you have to be very careful to not have your address disclosed online. I communicate mainly in encryption, and so these are, and my hard drive is encrypted, and but this is what investigative journalists do as well, I believe, or anyone working against Nazis, investigating against Nazis in Germany.
Working against, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Working against would be activism.
That's true.
Informing about them would be more journalism.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think any investigative reporter in Germany just wants the information about Nazis to get out and doesn't give a shit. So they work in a different way. They really want to, maybe they give them a voice from time to time, and they're fair. And some activists, and that's a big difference, will think twice if the information he just got has to go out or not, or if it's actually damaging for the left side if this information goes out. So, again, there's like...
Have you ever been, I don't know, afraid?
Yes, often. I think after I threw a pie on Beatrix von Storch.
Very famous video, by the way. Check it out on YouTube. Yes. Cake on Beatrix von Storch.
Yeah, we pied her on a conference because she was, basically doing right radical stuff, but saying that we should shoot on children eventually. And after that, the whole neo-Nazis of Germany, I was target number 1 for a week or so. So I didn't fear the organized Nazis because I believed they wouldn't do anything right now. It's controllable. But the one lunatic, that's always the problem. If you've got one lunatic who says, I have to kill him now, it can happen. Like it happened in Hanau, or it happened in other contexts.
But you're still going on?
Huh?
But you're still going on? I think it would be completely reasonable to say, well, look, I've done this. I lay low, I do something different, I take a job in the, journalistic news something where I just have an office job, which would be completely fine, and I lay low, and this I've done for a couple of years, and now I move on, and it's too risky for me.
Well,
on a personal level, I could relate.
Yeah. I make sure I don't do too much, and when there's times in a year where I've got a lot of energy and I can do a lot, and there's other times I do less. And also, I don't want to be all my life in danger, of course, but there's other people who are experiencing racism every day on a daily basis because they're black. And I think I am not really in danger, and I'm still getting jobs, I'm still getting invited to this conference, and racism is much more existential for other people in society who do not even do anything. So, of course, I'm careful, I'm taking precautions, but I wouldn't put myself in I don't see myself as especially...
to put it in context and perspective in comparison to others. Okay. Jean Peters, the line between where journalism ends and activism starts. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. If you have any more questions for Jean, just make sure, put it in the chat. We'll put them forward. Sorry, just never try to read and speak at the same time. Will confuse you, at least confuse me, definitely. So we'll make sure he reads them and get an answer to you.
Sure, and I'm really happy to answer any email. So if you write also to my private email online, you can find
as you
it.
can see. And if you want to see his input again, it will be put out there. So make sure you double check if you want to know something else. That's it for our plenary session, for our last plenary session actually. It was is still the final day. We'll take a break now, about an hour. We will be back at 8 p.m. Central European Time with our last listening theater. That's called It's All Their Fault. Sorry, thank you for the correction. It's 7 p.m. I will sleep until 8 p.m. I will be back at 8 p.m. and then everybody else will be gone. So probably make sure you just take an hour and then you will be back at 7 p.m. Thank you. The piece we're listening to, It's All Their Fault, when an ordinary small town in Slovakia tries to handle a delicate situation. That will be our final and last session, and it will be the final listening theater as well. Jean, thank you again so much for being with us tonight, and see you in an hour.